Hey guys, if you'd like to know how to paint your steel targets to best effect for your thermal scopes, check out this video. So this experiment that I did, I've got these small 6-inch targets, or maybe they're 8-inch, whatever. I took them down to bare metal with the flap wheel, and then I painted them some different colors. So we've got black, we've got white, and in this video I'm painting this one metallic, just testing the different reflectivity or absorption of the paint. I also took a sample and I bought this stuff, these ceramic beads online. They sell them as a way to put it in your interior house paint to help insulate your walls better. I'm trying it for this to see how it works on the steel targets. Does it help them maintain their heat in the evening or reflect more by being more insulated? So that was the goal of this, and we'll see how that works. As you can see here, I had to brush this on. I used some foam brushes. Certainly a pain in the butt, so definitely a tick in the cons column for this paint. If it works really well, then great. Maybe it's worth the hassle. If it doesn't work, then this is definitely not going to be worth the pain in the butt. All right, so the test plates that I painted have been down here. They were down here all day yesterday. I added the one. I was kind of curious if adding that ceramic, that ceramic powder to the black paint would help it hold on to its heat longer in the evening. So we're going to test that out. So down there I have got regular black paint, black with the ceramic, regular white paint, white with ceramic, and then a silver, just a metallic paint. Just standard. All the paint is either like a standard Rust-Oleum or something like that. The only thing exotic is that those ceramic beads. So they're sitting in the sun. I'm going to be taking pictures with this Pulsar Thermion XG50 periodically throughout the day. We'll see how they react to the how the different targets react, and then based on what we find out here, then we'll put it on a real target and look at that in some different scenarios. So check these images out that I'm going to take throughout the day. All right, so here we've got the first image. This was taken at 8 a.m. The first one is at 100 yards and then the second at 50 yards. You can see on the far left, that's just the normal black paint. And then the second one from the left is with the ceramic. This is actually backwards from what I would have thought these would have looked like. Now, at 8 a.m., with the berm to the east, this picture is taken looking east, so it hasn't seen a whole lot of sun at this time just yet. But you can compare those, and it actually looks like the ceramic one is a little bit warmer, and then we've got the normal white and then the ceramic white. That's kind of what I expected there. The ceramic white looks just a hair cooler, but they're so close it's tough to really call that. And then on the end, kind of in between, well, obviously closer to the white, we have the silver, seeing how that affects it. Now, the interesting thing on this one is you can see that black line towards the base of the square, and I believe what that is just the angle. There's a weld right there that's angled at a 45 degree, and I think that's just how that's reflecting that differently. The thermal doesn't just picks that up as black because it must not be reading any temperature there given that. So something interesting to consider, maybe something that can be exploited down the line to make a target look a certain color or look different, but kind of cool. But yeah, definitely black shows up really white hot and the white does not. So it's a good contrast there. All right, now we're skipping to 1 p.m. in the afternoon. This day had a high in the 80s or so, so it was a warm enough day. A lot of good sun. Actually, it was kind of cloudy in the morning, and then the sun came out an hour or so before I took these photos. So you got some good sunshine on them. You can definitely see how bright those are. The first picture is at 100 yards, and you can kind of see everything around it a little bit better. The berm and stuff, how that's warmer. Some of the surrounding area, and then we zoom in. Well, I'm physically moved up to 50 yards for the second picture. Here you can see just how bright those black ones are. The ceramic ones actually look a little bit brighter on the black and a little bit darker on the white. That's again a bit surprising, but the differences between the two are really not all that big of a difference. They're more or less the same. The whites did kind of even out with the silver on the end there, so the silver is now kind of on par with that. So just an interesting thing to note, and you can still see that little black area on the bottom of the silver. So let's move on. Here we have the 50-yard shot taken at 7:37 p.m. So this was August 9th, so sunset was at 8:44 p.m. just for reference. So we're a little bit over an hour away from the sunset. Really good color in those blacks yet. All the other ones are more or less evened out. It does look like the silver one is a little bit darker, a little bit more contrast, but as far as the ceramic or non-ceramic, not a real big deal between the others. Here we've got the picture from 8:15 p.m., so about half an hour before sunset. I can definitely see already how the heat is dissipating. I look back at my pictures of this day, and we did have some, it was a bit overcast in the afternoon, on and off. I was trying to show how it was darkening up at this point, but my Samsung phone does such a good job with low light photos that I couldn't really tell any difference. It changed everything, and it didn't look like it was getting dark at all. So not much to show there, but you can see how the black is hanging on to its heat, and the other three are more or less the same. Thing to note here is that the ceramic does not seem to be holding on to its heat any longer like I had hoped, so not much of a difference there. Here's the second to last photo taken at 8:37 p.m., so just a few minutes before sunset. You can see that they are all starting to more or less equalize together. They still stand out from the background a bit, being as they're steel, and the black ones are certainly doing a little bit better, but already, getting close to the point where you're not going to be able to, see it stand out, or at least see the vitals and see how that is differentiated. So let's look at the last picture. All right, here's the final picture of the day at 9:02 p.m., 15 minutes after sunset or so. So definitely they've equalized even further. The two white ones actually look like they're a bit darker than the rest, but not by much. The silver and the black ones look the same, so everything's more or less equalized. You can still see the steel silhouetting against the grass behind it at this point, just because it's going to reflect, hold on to heat differently than the grass, but the targets themselves have more or less equalized. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a couple of actual vital targets and going to paint them. I'm going to do a combination of white on black and black on white for the two, just so you can see what they look like and how they stand out. Another thing to consider here is that the background on this, so right now I've got it against the grass, so that really dissipates heat. It keeps it darker looking. Just in this photo, you can see to the right is the berm where there's some exposed dirt, and you can see just how much heat the ground holds. So off to the left in this picture, I've got a little bit more dirt showing, and I'm going to go out now. I'm about a month after these were taken, so things are quite a bit cooler now. Not nearly so much warmth during the day, but I'm going to go take the targets and put them in front of, one in front of the grass and one in front of the dirt, and then we'll compare those colors and see just how they look on the thermals doing the same thing. The ceramic, not anywhere worth the hassle that it was to mix all that stuff and hand brush it on with the expense and everything, so really no need to mess with that. So just going to stick with the straight black and straight white. They're going to be the easiest to find, cheapest to get, no matter what you do, and the results won't be nominally any different, so we'll go with that. All right, so I'm out here on the range. I got these two targets painted up with the most contrasting colors. The silver did some interesting things, but you're gonna have a lot easier time finding white, and the difference wasn't appreciable. So let's just go with a simple black and white. The ceramic didn't do anything. So the next thing to consider is your backdrop. So on this one, on the black coyote here, I've got grass behind it. So grass doesn't show up as being particularly warm in the thermal, so it creates a cooler backdrop. So I went with black on this one and a white thermal. Black to absorb as much heat as possible to show up against the cooler background. On this side, the hog, I went with white because behind it, I've got a bunch of soil, dark soil. This is kind of a compost heap where I'll put grass clippings and stuff like that. So it absorbs a lot of heat during the day. Not only that, but the activity inside of it, the biological activity breaking down that grass and stuff like that, that's going to generate its own heat. So I wanted something to look a little bit cooler to stand out against it. So it's like 2 something here. We're up in the 70s today. A little bit of time has gone by, but we've got some nice sun. And for these targets, that's the biggest thing. If you got a cloudy day, these targets are going to be a lot closer to ambient temperature than when they can do their thing with the paint absorbing the sun. So not quite as convenient as an active system where you can count on it whenever you want, but for being nice and easy with a passive setup, it'll get the job done. So might as well make it work as well as possible. I'm going to go down to 50 yards. We'll get a picture of this right now, kind of peak heat of the day, and then I'll show you some pictures of it as the day progresses. All right, here you can see the 2 targets up against their respective backgrounds. You see just how hot that dirt pile is. That really kicks off a lot of heat. I didn't catch it at the time, but I messed up on that hog target, and the vital plate was on it backwards, so it's angling back the wrong way. So that hot spot you can see in the middle of the hog is really just a gap there where you can see the dirt pile behind it. So don't pay any mind to that. But you can really see just how well that hog sticks out, being a lot cooler than behind it, but you don't get a whole lot of definition on the vital of it either. I can barely see it. Now, in the scope, it looks a bit clearer than after I've taken the images off of it, but you know, you're going to get a pretty good idea of just the contrast there is. Whereas the coyote, you can see just how well that sticks out there. That did a really good job. You can see plain as day where the vital is at. I think that, you know, the target tends to shade the vital a little bit too. So having that be the white, you're shading it and reflecting as much of the sun as you can. And then the target looks nice and bright compared to the grass. Another kind of interesting thing to note is the conduit legs on it. That conduit, that zinc plating or that galvanized coating on the conduit, and I think so the reflective coating and then the angle of it with the round, you've always got it coming off at weird angles. It shows up as black. It always did on the stands when I could see them over off to the right too when I was doing this test. So the conduit legs really do help you find the target if you're going to be struggling with it. As temperatures change. Here I moved both the targets over in front of the grass so you could compare them apples to apples on that side. You can see just how much warmer the black coyote is than the white hog and how much better contrast you do really see on the vital compared to the body. Here you can see both of them in front of the hot dirt there to get a comparison on that side of things. And then, yes, indeed, the cooler hog does contrast much better against the dirt pile, although you still have the contrast issues with the vital. So it may still be in your best interest to go the white body with the black vital. It's entirely up to you, but I do like still having that contrast that the coyote shows. Here we are at 7:14 p.m. Starting to wind down for the day as far as sunlight goes. This is probably a maximum of what it ever got warming up, but the sun is definitely starting to head below the horizon up here in South Dakota. You can see just how brightly that coyote is glowing. That's really impressive. As that coyote got warmer, though, you can see that there's less, and probably as the angle of the sun came down more and was getting more directly on that vital, there is less definition there, but you can still definitely see pretty plainly where that vital is on the coyote. The hog, boy, that thing is really close to ambient temperature of that pile, so there is not a whole lot of contrast with anything there. So it would be a lot more difficult to see at this time of day with the black body and the white vital. Here we are at 7:46, so about half hour later, you can definitely see how things have cooled down a bit. The coyote is no longer glowing, and your definition between the vital and the body is not nearly as great, but you can still see it there. The hog, on the other hand, is starting to stand out a little bit more from the warm pile behind it. Pretty similar definition at this point between the vital and the body. Here we are at 8:16 p.m. and yeah, both targets look to be really similar in temperature. We're cooling down a lot more quickly this time of year, so this was a pretty cool evening, and it was really sucking the heat out of those targets. Still see the coyote pretty clearly against that cooler grass background. Hog, much more difficult to see at this point. Now at 8:42 p.m., the coyote is almost the perfect temperature to match the grass behind it. You can't even see the body. It almost looks like you can just see the vital floating there in midair a little bit at this point. The hog is now standing out a little bit better against the warm soil behind it, but still not all that great. 9:24 p.m. and you can see that the coyote is actually starting to cool to be cooler than the grass, so we're starting to get some definition back there. You can still see the hog over there, kind of same thing. You're getting more definition because the hog is cooling relative to the pile, which is going to hold its heat for a bit longer. So we'll just continue on here. Here is the final photo of the evening at 10:36 p.m. You can see that the targets have cooled considerably, and now you've got all that grass behind that coyote is warmer than it, and you've got good definition. Not a whole lot of definition between the vital and the body, but you can still see where it's at to get a good kill shot on it if you were out there practicing. I didn't take any pictures later, but I imagine that this will kind of hold true for quite some time. That steel was pretty cool to the touch by this point, and that grass, that biological material just holds on a lot better. Hog, not a ton of definition over there. You could still see it. You could shoot it if you had to, obviously, but not nearly as nice. So, I mean, for my money, I'm going to be going with a black body and a white vital and trying to get it up against some grass or something where it's going to be a little bit more consistent, dead backdrop, easier to see. I understand that you don't always have the choice, but it just shows you what you're going to be looking at, what you can expect. So that concludes this little experiment. Hopefully it gives you guys some information that you can use to make your next range trip with your thermal the best that it can be. You can find these targets and a lot of other really cool stuff at atlastargetworks.com.